The eastern highlands of Papua New Guinea is a land of tropical rainforests and savanna. The dense rainforest has historically protected the eastern highlands peoples from many outside influences. The ethnic groups who live here have been of great interest to anthropologists because of their geographic isolation. The Baruya, a group of 2,500 people, are one of the most isolated groups in the region. They were first contacted by Europeans in 1951. Among the Baruya, cultural traditions have remained strong, although by the 1960s, the Baruya had begun to feel the foreign influence of missionaries, traders, and a central government. In 1967, the Baruya met their first anthropologist, a young Frenchman named Maurice Godelier. This film is about the work of this French anthropologist and his ongoing effort to find the Baruya story.
Anthropologists go to New Guinea because they think that they have to find very different sorts of societies, very different from what is now existing in their own society. So they prefer to go to the most distant and the most different societies. So for many of us, we think we are going to discover a sort of genuine kind of man, of mankind. That is just silly in some way, because there is no genuine man or genuine sort of man. Man or mankind is the totality of what has been developed by man, so there is no society to prefer or to choose in some way when we study things. So now, most of us, we think we can do anthropology anywhere. There is no society more interesting than another one. Every society is interesting and difficult to understand anyway. So the problem for me was to understand what does it mean to compare systems, no? And I had the choice between comparing dead systems, like historians do, or to compare living systems, like economists do and anthropologists. And the economists were comparing only two systems, always and always: socialist systems, Russia and United States or France, capitalist systems. And I think it was, the way they were doing was not very scientific, very shallow, very ideological. So I decided to widen the range of comparison, to work as an anthropologist with living systems.
When Maurice first arrived in Baruya territory, he knew no one. He received permission from two Baruya clans to stay in Wiavu and build a house near the center of the village, a house where different groups could come and feel comfortable to speak. He then began to build a network of relationships with the local people.
Guataye was the first to help me. He was working with me as an informant, helping me in the house too, and also he negotiated with his father-in-law the location of my house. Warino took care of me all the time and protected me, not physically, but he gave me food. I was taken into the group of Warino's family. Warino was also one of the few men able to make stone tools and to use them. Tultul, well, his name is Biandaye. People called him Tultul because he was chosen by the officer as a Tultul, as a representative of the government in the village. He had two daughters, Darawinak and Yimbaingak. And Yimbaingak was really the leader of the girls. Very bright girl and very arrogant in some way, arrogant towards the men. She was a provocative girl. I have about 10 regular informants who are each interested in different topics, like Baruya history, warfare, family organization, and so on. They teach me step by step. Like a child, they take me further, little by little. I have to find and bring together the different pieces of Baruya culture. That's my job, to find the story.
Agriculture is fundamental to the Baruya economy and is an important strand in the Baruya story. The Baruya are skilled agriculturalists. Their gardens are the most productive of any tribe in the region. The main food crops are taro root and sweet potatoes, which are planted and harvested by Baruya women. Although the Baruya have had steel tools since about 1950, Baruya women still use the traditional technology, the digging stick, since it allows them to harvest these root crops without damaging them. To identify the various types of root crops the Baruya cultivate, Maurice relies on his friends and informants. To determine how much space each plant needs, he relies on his own culture's system of measurement.
You can ask the people, but it's much better to be with them in the field, in the garden, and to measure and to be precise, to not be just qualitative, to not be just casual. To be precise, you have to measure. We have learned from our society that.
Maurice has been weighing the women's sweet potato harvest in order to determine how many pounds of sweet potatoes each Baruya garden produces. Maurice records how much of the sweet potato crop the Baruya eat themselves and how much is grown to feed their pigs. Baruya pigs do not require much feeding since they find most of their own food by wandering in the forest.
A big change occurred during my stay after 6 months, when I started to map the gardens and to live with the people every day for months in the gardens with them, in the bush with them, to discuss about the quality of the soils for sweet potato, for taro, and so on. And it was a very good point of departure because people were proud of their gardens. They had many things to teach me about the forest, about wars, about their ancestors who chopped down the trees, and so on and so on. And so a lot of things came which were not dealing with agriculture. All right, Papa bilang ground, Onem Papa bilang ground. Papa bilang ground. Bipo. Kwake Buliman Bakia. Buliman Bakia.
Kwakanda ground belum Buliman Bakia.
Yeah, now yang bagwe kisim. Yeah. Munda inai. Yang majua.
Yang majua.
Tis pela line, etc. All right. Now, one man iwakim banis.
Kurucak ayat ke apa?
Yinggeria winner, yeah. Awan up tas, Start team in Lusim.
Ikan na yaong kalaka.
Nah, nen bilangem urarka?
Urarka.
Eh?
Urarka.
Urarka. Bilang big bush ou bilang
Belum big bush tu.
bush bilang garden?
Anda kama yawa ina mbuji kama yawa ina ika.
Stablo ya tu.
Na na wayu
60,
Yang nombra ba ina ka?
66 centimeter. Nou, yung gawala staat. Gawala staat.
Itu kau resta.
Na narapirakan.
Mariji.
Kelala bumbu. Kelala.
Kulala.
Mariji.
Wa.
Jagan waya kan.
Ya bipo.
Jinong jagan waya kan yundu kawala chatnde. Apa na? Jagan to kamra ba yo.
Des pala kan bush. Bipo urar kata asal stablo ya. Bush bulo.
Bush bulo
Di ba bulo bush. Na me pala katin bush alright. Des pala kan.
Yung gawala ikama regrowth. Alright, when I'm kind ground.
Wada apa?
Ampanya dajik.
Cimanda.
Waka subsoil. Chimwaka subsoil. Na kisi mula bilang mi?
The Baruya have names for more than 20 different types of soil and know the relative qualities of each. Maurice records the Baruya names for each type of soil. After a chemical analysis of the soil samples, he will be able to compare Baruya soil types with those of Western science. All this is done to understand why the Baruya plant certain crops in some soils, but not in others.
Inap? Alright, now ikam. Ikam ikat story mo. Leg below me na impasse.
Morris, vai me prender na página Morris eu nunca.
Yuki, we panim liklik op aan bouwt. Minolai. Okay. Aí agora sai na.
Você quer vir lá grande na rasne? Hã? Daga ninji mari ko aja anda. Apa?
Wie nu krijg ik wel aan tap.
Hey, murka ya da ya ni.
Alright, start team now. DY Cross, you go to number 1 station. Suppose big pala ni kan quick time ni pala. Stay team just pala. Huh? Alright? Alright. One pala man pulling no hap. You go redeem and mission up. When you map a garden, it's a very boring thing. And you need to organize your work with a team. And surely you are a leader when you do that. Maybe I have a temper partly of a leader, so... But with the Baruya it was not too bad, because they are warriors and they like people strong in some way, and a bit forceful, even the women between themselves. Men with women, women with women, women with men. Hey, bilang sing bilang patrol. Oh, hey.
Siapa terai?
Toki Mary tok nating lo Mary and Tassel. Wanem. Eh.
Porque não caiu na Morris.
Baatnya benar benar apa tu?
Badan tuan kau. Taruh tayu orang kata. Jangan tentu jangan tinggal yang aja.
Oh, you like him pie?
Ajar menahan kau nomor ajar aku nyoba. Malin nak kau ini lagi. Nan ang babur da ko kakan da da ka da ba. Ndakan. Papa.
Betul ino finish
Wali
yet.
ka na nga mapan kunya ko. Da da ko ni. Ar da ka da ba ka.
Mo di dem ba may kala am da ki na ho.
Eh? Already?
Ko pa di ko kunya di pidi mi nga. Ar da ka da ba ka. Oye, ko bi ka le problem la ko ko.
Pero mori zer tani yukisi. Bizim nami cross long plan ba ba.
Story night. Maski, story night.
Nan no da da. Sir na ita wa mi gutu. Udara.
Bell be already or to morning time, that's all.
Ang mo ka kala ta ko na ta. Nya ba la da.
Wow, lose him.
Chau chau.
Din yan ka da ka do na.
Ka wala nya da ito. Wa pa wala mo pa ta. Anjing na wan na do ra pa ya ka. Akina wan na chung mo jeng. Yo ka na re wa pala.
All right, game 139.
Antara tinnya ka di kriwer ko. Paka o nya dai kan na nya pa ni na da. Sa ka do ka na ka na ka anja crash na di. Wa ka sing ilangi kulang ko kara ma uliwan nda to. Jangan ba mga napandaan na sila. Wanyo kara ma tinyo buto ka kabayo.
Wait. You know can talk long this plus something story night.
Important da yakada.
Ito, milay ka bisini sila ya. Milay ka bisini sila na sa ka.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah,
If I go sing now, don't struggle.
Ruko na mi pala ruko na lo.
Baruas, they fight each other very often. They fight with fists. And after you meet them 2 weeks later in the forest going to hunt. So because they have to live all their lifetime between themselves, they have to fight, they have to love, they have to be friends again and so on. They have to manage life. Here in our society, you fight, you don't talk to people anymore. There they fight and they talk again.
Salt plays a central role in the Baruya economy and is another important strand in the Baruya story. The Baruya have long had a reputation in the New Guinea highlands as the salt makers, manufacturers of these salt bars, which are used in Baruya ceremonial meals and are also used as a form of money in trade with neighboring tribes.
They were producing a means of exchange because the Baruya, they live at 2,000 meters, it is cold, they have not got the trees with barks to make bark caves and so on. A lot of things like that. So they need products from other tribes in order to reproduce themselves, materially and symbolically, politically too. They need the feathers of birds of paradise, and there are very few birds of paradise. It's too cold where they are living and so on. So they need birds of paradise feathers, they need bark caves, they need stones for stone tools. And so they needed to produce something in order to get what they could not produce themselves. So they developed a salt production.
Baruya salt originates in this high grass, which is grown in irrigated fields near the village. In order to understand the economic value of Baruya salt, Maurice must know how much land and labor time are needed to produce each salt bar. Guataye says that Warrenu is the owner of this field and points out the property markers. He tells Maurice that a typical harvest requires 4 days of grass cutting. The salt grass has been harvested and burned, and the salty ashes placed in gourds for filtration. These filtration racks are owned by Warrenu and his family. As the fresh water is poured through the ashes, it dissolves the salt and separates it from the ash. The salty water flows into bamboo storage tubes. When the water no longer tastes salty, the used ashes are discarded. The women work for 2 days during this stage of the process. The salty water is taken to the evaporation hut of a Baruya salt specialist. Here, the salt specialist must maintain a constant temperature in the oven for 5 days and 5 nights. Using a secret knowledge and magic, he will watch over the salt water's evaporation and transformation into crystallized salt bars. The oven has 15 molds of 2 different sizes, and so produces 2 different sized salt bars. The Baruya call the longer bars chamunye and the shorter bars decano.
I am Chamonix ou Decano?
Sam.
Eh?
Yeah.
Tu spera? Ouais. Tuta? I'm Tuta ou non?
Maurice must convert these Baruya terms into his European system of measurement to determine how much salt Warrena's harvest produced.
No, ik wil een hap straight. Nou, look here. Tu spera? Non savais quel now, ne? Ja, for suit. No. Man. Wait, 6, wait. 6, 8, 9, 17, and... Dapat ni? Or the same bone, or the same 30, 60, close to long 70 pounds. 70 pounds. 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10, 10. Papa bilong minta time bilong karamapi mo kita. True. Reply right team name bilong lo kita. Lip bilong wanim kalberana.
Kurang dawak.
Eh?
Kurang dawak.
Indu ka wala?
Indu wala sim la.
Sikin bilong indu ka wala?
Indu wala. Wala sama.
Nem bilong hem doctors? Tispa sikin?
Kawe kelak.
Gawe kelak.
Yes.
Ik kost Indu ka wala?
Kawe kelak.
Na, work bilong Meki Monosen?
Kuiwa?
Puya.
Ulah buyan jual kuinya.
Ulah.
Puya, doctor je kolim puya.
Kuiwa no. Wah, kita juga kok. Tahu nih. Wah, kita.
Ula. Ipmaka. Ula Ipmaka.
The salt bars are carefully wrapped to protect them from humidity and from breaking as they are traded with neighboring tribes.
They will not exchange a bar of salt if it does not weigh a proper weight. I mean, they know if it is too light, it will not be accepted, or it will be difficult to sell it. They know all these things. They have also an appreciation of quantitative aspects of a quantity of salt for a quantity of a certain number of bark capes.
Bark cloth capes have been brought by traders from a neighboring tribe to exchange for Baruya salt bars. These Asiana traders live at a lower altitude where they are able to grow the trees from which this bark cloth is made. The Baruya must trade for this bark cloth since it cannot be produced on their own territory.
Well, by this time, I had calculated the total production time of Baruya salt bars. And during the exchange, I saw that the Asiana gave 6 bark cloth capes for each long bar of salt. So I realized that I would need to go to the Asiana villages to measure their production time for bark cloths. I asked myself whether the 6-to-1 exchange rate represented an equal exchange of labor time. In fact, my conclusion was that there was less labor time spent by the Baruya to make salt than by the Asiana to make bark capes. In our times, it would mean that the Baruya were exploiting in some way the Asiana people because the rate of exchange was unequal. Less time or less labor given for more labor. That was my conclusion at that time. But now it's a bit more controversial because 2 of my assistants have been there and worked on the same topic and they don't reach the same conclusions. This point is now controversial between Pierre and I. And well, it's okay, it's very good. I mean, I don't care. Knowledge is a process and a collective process in some way, so I have no pride or no shame about that. And you understand that in order to observe carefully, you have to do one job, not 5 or 10 jobs like we do when we are alone in the field. At the same time, it is difficult to bring 5, 6 anthropologists in the same village. Otherwise, too many white people in a village, it disrupts more than one man. So it's a complex problem, you know, to observe quantitatively exactly things.
The Baruya must clear patches of forest land to make their gardens. Traditionally, this was done using only stone tools. During the 1940s, imported steel axes and knives began arriving in Baruya territory. The Baruya traded their salt bars for these steel tools, as they had done in the past for stone tools. By 1950, before the Baruya had seen their first white man, they had replaced their stone technology with steel.
I felt it was absolutely crucial and urgent for me to investigate on the production and the use of stone tools. Because in 1969, I was one of the last men of the world to be able to see the last men using stone tools. So I was convinced of the importance to record the last information possible on this topic. Wherein started himself to teach about Stone Ages to the young men, passing culture from generation to generation. It was a funny story for them to use stone tools because they've been throwing them into the bush 10 years before, and so why to use these things? Because now we have got bush knives and steel axes. But anyway, because they knew of my fancies, you know, they accepted, and also we brought 2 bags of rice and a lot of tinned meat and tinned fish. So that was a good, funny party for them. You know. Why not? It was all paid by the white men.
Guataye measures off an area of forest which the older men have selected for Maurice's stone adze experiment. The older men claim that these trees are comparable to the virgin forest they had cleared with stone adzes 40 years before. The women begin clearing the undergrowth by hand. According to Baruya custom, the women are forbidden to touch the men's stone adzes. Even while working with their bare hands, the women clear 100 square meters of undergrowth in only 40 minutes. As the men begin work, they organize themselves into groups of blood relations or brothers-in-law. These are the traditional groupings for cooperative work among Baruya men. Maurice has measured the diameter of each tree and compares the chopping time of stone and steel tools.
What is not important in their culture is labor time. It's very important for us to understand that. What is important is effort, the quantity, the amount of effort and pain to chop down a tree. It's not for them a matter of time. It's a matter of pain, a painful activity.
During the chopping, many of the stone blades break or come loose, and the younger men complain about the inefficiency of these old tools. The first day, 33 trees are felled in 19 man-hours of work. That night, one of the Baruya shamans, Inamwe, had a dream. He saw the spirits of the men who were participating in the experiment fly off into the night to join the tree spirits. He warns the men of sickness and catastrophe, reminding the older men that the tree spirits have not been honored in the customary way.
So at the beginning it was fun for them, but the second day after the dream of Inamwe, it became very serious. Something happened which has not been forecast by any one of us. The dream of Inamwe during the night, between the first and the second day, you know, the night. And so the next day, something has changed in the mood of the people, in the attitude of the people. So they came back to the forest and they started to have a ritual.
Heeding the shaman's warning, the Baruyas select the largest tree in the area and prepare it for their ritual by removing the moss.
I can record. Yeah? I can record.
Maurice, why don't you run it?
No, I record now what they are doing. I shall record later on what...
Warinu instructs the young women as they plant a ritual garden at the base of the ceremonial tree. The tree is decorated with magic leaves, black feathers from the bird of paradise, and cowrie shell necklaces belonging to the young men. These are all offered to please the spirit of the tree, for if the spirit is angry, it will take away the strength of the men as it falls. Now, following Baruya tradition, the ceremonial tree remains decorated, while the other trees in the measured area are chopped down.
They cut a small tree's half of the trunk, and they they chop down a very big tree at the top of the slope. And so when it falls, the big tree squashes and breaks all the small trees. So they save half of the time for each small tree down the slope. So they have a strategy of saving time and saving pain all at the same time.
Wonenara tells the group that it is time to cut the ceremonial tree. The young men insist on using steel axes. Maurice's calculations now show that steel axes are 3 to 4 times more efficient than traditional stone tools. The men hold sticks, wrapped with magic leaves, which they prepare to throw as the tree falls, thus waging a symbolic war which will be carried to their enemies by the wind of the falling tree. For the past 2 years, Maurice has seen the Baruya use the fallen trees to build sturdy fences around their gardens. The fences protect the Baruya's crops from their roaming pig herds. Now he asks the men to split the logs without steel axes, as they traditionally did in the past.
At one stage during the experiment, Wonenara casually mentioned to me that before the arrival of steel axes, most fences were not made of split logs, but of bamboo, because in the old days there were not many pigs. I was amazed at this information. I asked Wonenara why he never mentioned this before in our many interview sessions. He told me, well, you never asked. He told me that the steel axes allowed the Baruya to cut down more trees and cultivate more land in order to feed more pigs.
This discovery, that the Baruya have not always kept so many pigs, is extremely important to Maurice's understanding of the Baruya story, an understanding of how Baruya culture has changed over time.
School finish.
It is now clear that these sturdy fences are not traditional, but are a recent development, a result of steel technology. Since the arrival of steel axes, Baruya men have been able to clear forests 4 times faster than they could with stone. The men now work in small groups or alone, rather than in these traditional large groups. Steel axes have given the men more leisure time.
With more efficient tools, you need less cooperation in work. And so, in some way, one of the foundations of cooperation is shrinking, eroded in some way. And so these consequences they learn later, very quickly. But the society became more individualistic than before. More, you know, and relationship between men and women changed very deeply.
Baruya women must now carry more wood, then plant and harvest larger gardens, still using only their traditional digging sticks. They must now also care for larger pig herds. The women's leisure time has been greatly reduced by the arrival of steel tools.
I try to understand what has been the effect of the substitution of steel tools for stone tools on the culture. And that was very clear. The women work more than before because they did not benefit from the new tools. So in fact, the introduction of new productive forces had a double effect, opposite. Good for men and in some way bad for women. Most of the anthropologists, they are just looking for a traditional way of life. The way to live before the white people came. That is very important to do that because you cannot understand the transition to a new world if you don't understand the point of departure of this world, of this transformation. But to me, the influence of the army, the police, the missionaries, all these things were as important as the traditional Baruya way of life.
The central government has built an airstrip 1.5 hours walk from the village of Wiava. This site was the traditional battlefield used by the Baruya and their nearby enemies. Through this airstrip, the Baruya have become accessible to outside influences beyond their control. Twice a week, planes arrive with mail and supplies for the German missionary and his wife, who operate the Lutheran mission and trade store. Baruya Salt will not purchase anything at the mission store. Here, money from the national government is the only currency accepted.
Seven. So, and 1007. So, we got some umbrella here. I think it is 1000.
You have to distinguish between various sorts of missionaries. You have missionaries who don't try to interfere too much and to destroy too much. They respect the cultures. You have some missions and some missionaries who despise deeply the religion of the people. They say they are pagan. They believe in wrong things. They are dark, and their skin and their heart is dark. Are dark. Very strong effect on the culture, because it's worse. It's worse than a gun, you know, when you shoot people, because you shoot their culture, their ideas, what is inside, in fact.
All right, you may lot to now, long name, belong God, Trivan, Papa, na Pikinini, na Holy Spirit, true. I think walk money stop name long place belong you bella. Lik hap talk long this bella. Jesus long you bella finish. Na you bella long true. Long end.
Work more around when and that's what man to pin around when.
Long time before no got one bella church or one bella pastor is long some bella line man Mary Piginini is stop long this bella big bella push. God is long you bella is. Na emi sabe some bella something more. Emi sabe you bella I long emi sabe long fasting belong you bella. Na you bella is stop long 2 tag true before.
Kanga kan do ne chere ne do ne pa kan ne ne kuma ka kan jingi nyamu mo jawe merkanere den. Chok mo jawe merkanere.
Now Jesus, I bin sing out him sambela walkman. Na mi do, mi bin harim, Mrs. belong mi bela I bin harim, this bela cry belong Papa God. Na emi bin talk, you bela I go. Na talk out, na bring him light, long this bela 2 tag, long all this bela people. That's all, me bring him one bela name long you bela. Name belong Jesus. Na emi talk, me light belong ground.
Jawa yin men jen o buya jara na me munye ke buya jara na nyen duan gan.
Look him like time before. One bela man no good. Only been come long night, belong cut him store belong you me. Only no been make him this bela long time belong son. No God, only been make him this bela long time belong 2 tag.
Da jere buya duan pora duan kinga kan duan. Dara ya ja pora pora ulam ram kine da pora kukkam bulan mat na pora re kukkam mara man na jere yend pinya bulan duan. Choku jamu alpukan jingi jamu alpukan dara ran jere ya yat nyawet di jambran.
Before you pela na all tumpu na belong you pela ipin walk about long 2 tag. Or some long fasting. Only no clear good long all get something. Now Jesus ipin bring him this pela big pela light. Now you pela long more. Now you pela yet can make him one pela song belong talk bless.
During the colonial time, the missionaries had more power, much more power. They felt or they behaved as protected directly by European power. And more now, in this independent country, they are forced to respect the culture because there is a sort of ideological view of Papua New Guinea as a country with roots. And you cannot dig out roots of yourself without falling on the ground.
The central government wants to help the Baruya to join the national cash economy. At the government patrol post, which is on the edge of Baruya territory, looms have been provided to promote a local Baruya cottage industry. Programs like this enable some Baruya to become wage earners for the first time.
You can talk now. You like this black and white? Yeah. Before? You work all kita day or one per time, some per time. All kita time, you say work. Na Saturday you say work or you know?
Saturday no got work.
Sunday too? You know got work.
Sunday no got work. Friday work and Friday work. I'm Saturday no come work. Saturday is
The raw wool is imported from Australia. and the blankets, once they are woven, are sent by plane to sell in Goroka, the closest major town. For Baruya men, the usual way to obtain money is to leave Baruya territory to work for a wage. The clerk at the patrol post is recruiting Baruya men to work as plantation laborers.
You married or you not married? Single man. Not suppose you go nambis, you and I or making money which has an application pay below you.
Pes.
Pay one in Baratam below you.
Yes.
All right.
These men must sign up for a minimum of 2 years. Most of them will extend their contracts for longer periods. Many Baruya men are interested in learning about the outside world and want to see it for themselves.
Place below you?
We have.
On one of Maurice's occasional trips to the town of Goroka, he invites Warrena, Inamwe, and Guataye to accompany him.
I wanted all fellows like Inamwe, the great shaman, and Warrena, the old man, to come with me and to do just like the young man, to discover the outside world, which was acting on their culture.
The town of Goroka is 100 kilometers from Baruya territory. For Warrena and Inamwe, this is the first trip to an urban area.
I think I help the Baruya to establish themselves in a new relationship with the dominant culture. I was telling them, look, keep your culture, learn it, and mix what you want with what we bring you. But we don't bring you only positive things. We bring you many negative things for your culture and for life in some way.
The central government has been promoting new and larger European pigs. The Baruya have tried these foreign breeds, but have chosen not to adopt them, since these pigs cannot find their own food in the forest. They would depend totally on the Baruya sweet potato crop for nourishment. The Baruya have learned from experience that these fully domesticated breeds would drastically upset the balance between agriculture and pig husbandry, which they have achieved.
The Baruya have been very active in adapting themselves to the new life. They have selected the parts of their culture they wanted to drop, without any pressure of white people.
the science laboratory now?
Yeah. Where it is? Down below?
That's it.
Tupela, I belong you go close to. Tupela, one time. One pela, no, not.
And I book money.
You're okay.
They are moving, you know, they are small insects just moving continuously. So
Yeah, when I'm something, Ipma Baruya Men tispela. When I'm something banis, when I'm something belong, place belong win, guru belong hem, or something, okay. They knew that something in the books of the white people is strong. Some part of their strength and their power of domination is there in the books. But always I was telling them that our memory, our culture was in these books. And we white people, we record our culture. We keep it. It's a treasure. We live with it and from it. And so I say mine to you. I was always telling mine to you. Keep and preserve your culture in some way. At least keep it in the memory, in your living memory. And your children are going to school now. They know how to read and write. I hope I shall write a book on you, on your culture. It will be your book too, and your children will write a book or read my book and so on. But books are the strength of the white people. Take the strength of us and add to your strength.
For the past 13 years, Maurice and the Baruya have been working together to construct the Baruya story, the first written account of Baruya history and culture.
I hope to go back many times before dying. I shall have a double experience of what is man, from my society and from their society. I think I shall go back many times to follow that. With the same people I have known when they were children, in fact, now. That will be an experience like Margaret Mead before. Margaret Mead followed for 40 years the same groups and the same people and the children of the people she knew. I think it's quite nice. It has to be done anyway. If I can do, I shall do.